hybrid working and what it actually is, I think, again, it's important to note it's a very new term. None of us had heard of it until perhaps April, May last year, when it first kind of entered everyday parlance. And I think it's important to note that even before the emergence of hybrid working, we were hearing buzzwords and phrases like flexible working, remote working, agile working, distributed working. So hybrid kind of adds a little bit of confusion to that. And we've had a search around and we've looked for an all-defining kind of definition. The best that we've come up with for now is one that's been put together by the CIPD, the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development. Although for me personally, I'd caveat, I think that's the least worst option of what's out there. I don't think it's all encompassing. I think it's still a little bit vague. And I think then for us, we should all note that, apropos of hybrid working, there aren't any quick fixes. There's certainly no copy and paste. And actually getting to a state of optimal hybrid working in your business is going to depend on a whole raft of things, including the nature of your business, its culture, what it is that you actually deliver to the marketplace to create value, your customers, your staff, and basically the dynamics within which you operate on an everyday basis. I'd say that for a large part to the naming of this webinar, bricks are probably the only commonality that most organizations have now. And figuring out your optimal path to hybrid is going to be a highly unique endeavor. That said, I think we get the sense very much that there is a quest to find a common blueprint for hybrid, and I don't think that such thing exists. And just to accentuate that point, David, obviously you're dealing with all kinds of organizations all the time. So what illustrations can you share that would sort of demonstrate just how varied organizations can be?
Yeah, good, Catherine. So we are finding that organizations are still seeking to find their feet in a post-pandemic world. But most organizations with good, strong cultures are able to make careful and informed decisions based on their long understanding of their employees and their business. Now, recently, two very contrasting businesses we've dealt with recently have taken different approaches to hybrid. The first being a tech client, which they are a very culturally strong organization. They do have a hybrid policy. And that is where their team has been given the autonomy and choice to work from home for the most part of the week. However, as part of the fit out program that they've actually completed recently, they have in their new office space, they have accommodated space for all their staff to be in the office at one time, all the time, on a sort of desk per person ratio. Now, that's interesting, but they've done that because they really understand their team. They've asked what their employees want, and then they've recruited individuals with very similar values. And the individuals that are attracted to that organization really thrive off interaction with peers and colleagues, and they enjoy the social elements and aspects of their working environment. Now, in that instance, we designed and built all your typical things of an office, but most importantly, we integrated social areas into their new office, like including a gin bar, which really supports those that want to socialize at the end of the working day. Then in contrast, Kat, we had an organization in the logistics sort of sector that has a quite a different team dynamic. Their team is at different stages of their lives and with families and other priorities. And they've realized that their office was more of a destination place, a place to go more to just collaborate. And then they would do their task-based work remotely. So
Mhm.
the design that was done for that was more about less desk positions, reducing the occupancy to sub 50%, with the expectation that you work from home 2 or 3 days a week, but then coming into the office to collaborate and have those important meetings. So just a couple of examples
Mhm.
of what hybrid means to two different organizations. Neither, as you alluded to, can be or should be copied and pasted,
Mm.
um, but they have been developed uniquely for their employees and a good understanding of their businesses.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? There's a lot of variables to consider, and hopefully we'll be able to cover some of those off this morning. So, guys, do we have the results? Are we able to pop that up on the screen? Brilliant. Wow. Okay. So a real split there in terms of how many of you here today have got things figured out. And it's very clear from that it's very much a work in progress still. So good stuff. Okay, so why does hybrid working matter? I think this is an important point for us to explore as well, because we need to kind of understand why we're here and how the labour market has changed and what the risks are to business around hybrid working. So I think, as I said to you at the start, at Working the Future, we track emergent work trends. And what was very clear to us, even before anybody had ever heard of Wuhan or coronavirus, was that we are and have been for some time at the end of employer-led labour markets. I think that the internet and globalization have absolutely transformed labour markets. And so, as an employer today, you, if you choose to, can access a much, much wider pool of talent spread infinitely more disparately across the globe, and you can hone into skills and competencies across all the continents if you so choose. But I think the flip side to that is that it's changed the nature of job seekers as well, and created a transparency so that job seekers today are far, far more discerning than they ever used to be. They use the internet to find out about employers before they'll even consider making a job application. And we can see that through the use of Glassdoor and social media channels. Job seekers are checking you out well in advance of ever even sending a CV across to you. And that's particularly relevant in the millennial and centennial kind of age bracket. So I'd loosely define that as anybody below the age of 40. We've also got, as you probably are all aware, we've got massive skills shortages here in the UK at the moment. And just as a small data point, we've listed there the Recruitment and Employment Confederation, which is the kind of membership body for the recruitment industry, noted in the last week of August more than 1.6 million vacancies nationally. So that gives a flavour of just how buoyant the labour market is at the moment. And I would add into that the media is full of talk about the Great Resignation, which denotes that many people at the moment have got their eyes and ears opened for job opportunities and are perhaps looking for changes, something different after the psychological impact of the pandemic and successive lockdowns. Another point for us to note is that many more people today are involved in knowledge work rather than production and manufacturing work. And knowledge work is very, very different insofar as, what you do on a daily basis or a weekly basis will be subject to continuous change. So it's really the rise of knowledge work has accelerated demand for career customization. People want to do work and assume working patterns in the way that fits the actual tasks in front of them. we can just move on to the next. Brilliant. I think it's also very important to note that demand for remote working and flexible working was massively on the rise pre-pandemic, again, perhaps reflecting that uptick in the knowledge economy sector. And I remember seeing some research that came out in 2019 that was UK centric, talking about how 70% of surveyed employees felt that flexible working made a job more attractive, and that 30% of those surveyed would prefer flexible working to a pay rise. So I think that's pretty relevant to this conversation. Another point that we've considered is, you know, in the early days of lockdown, when we were all sent to work from home, we all had to figure out our optimal working style. And while we were, you know, end-to-end Zoom meetings and bound in that sense by the kind of the digital constraints of our organizations, to a large extent, we had to build our own independence around how we got work done and how we juggled that with all of our other familial commitments. And I think that sense of autonomy, and I'll come back to that in a tiny bit, I think we can't underestimate that. There's a book that was written, I don't know, in the early 2010s by a guy called Daniel Pink, and it's called Drive. And it's about the three things that motivate us as at a human level. And one of those things is autonomy, the ability to pick and choose for ourselves and have some independence around our decision making. So in a nutshell, I would say modern job seekers are expecting flexibility and expecting the ability to work from wherever, whenever. And if you're not offering it as an organization, you're putting your business at significant risk, because, you know, your competitors will be offering it. And that's the important point here. And so if you're not offering it, you're limiting your access to job seekers on the open market, but you're also putting your own business under risk, because your staff will be expecting some element of it moving forward.